Welcome to Sola Church Online.
Good morning, everybody. So glad you've joined us. I hope you've had your morning coffee because we need everybody fully engaged as we close out 2020. Like, if you hear something you like, click like. If you hear something you love, click love. Like, leave comments. Tell us that you're watching, where you're watching from. Ask questions. Share favorite quotes or verses. Like, let's do this. Let's go. If you're watching on the Church Online platform, there's a link in the chat feed. It says invite. Click that and you can invite somebody to join us right now.
And if you're watching on Facebook, click share to post the service on your timeline.
Yeah, totally. So maybe you're going to watch later on YouTube. That's cool too. Be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss anything new from Sola Church. So, well, it's 2 days past Christmas, but I'm still feeling the Christmas vibe.
Me too. So we're still going to do a couple Christmas carols with you all.
Awesome.
So let's worship together.
In excelsis Deo. Angels we have heard on high, sweetly singing o'er the plains, and the mountains in reply, echoing their joyous strains. Gloria in excelsis Deo. Gloria in excelsis Deo. In excelsis Deo. In excelsis Deo. Shepherds, why this jubilee? Why your joyous strains prolong? What the gladsome tidings be, which inspire your heavenly song? Gloria in excelsis Deo. like shadows put to flight. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. O come, thou Key of David, come, and open wide our heavenly home. Make safe the way that leads on high, and close the path to misery. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel has come to thee, O
Man, I have all the Christmas feels after that.
Definitely. Going to miss Christmas.
You could probably do Christmas all year long.
Oh, yeah.
Well, guys, now it's time to worship with our giving. So you should see a link in the chat feed. Also, you can go to our website, solachurch.life, and click Give. You can give a one-time gift or schedule a recurring gift. Some people have asked about PayPal. So once again, that email address, if you're giving on PayPal, is give@solachurch.life. Thank you guys so much for your regular giving in 2020. There's still a couple days left in the year. If you're one of the many people that is giving strategically at year's end, please keep Sola Church in mind. We thank you for that. 2021 is going to be such a big year. We've launched online in 2020, but in 2021, we're going to launch in person in Santa Monica. So we're asking you to step into 2021 with us. That means we're asking you to step in and attend online on the weekend. We're asking you to step out and participate in one of our virtual small groups. And for those of you that are in or around LA, we're asking you to step up and join our launch team. That means that you're going to attend when we launch in person next year, and that you're going to have a role on the team. We so look forward to meeting and connecting with new team members in the weeks and months ahead.
So today we get our final Ornament sermon in your series.
Yeah, that's right. Today is part 4. So we're going to get Joseph, we're going to get Mary, most importantly, we're going to get Jesus.
That's awesome. I'm ready. So let's get into our time of teaching.
Every neighborhood has that guy who leaves his outdoor Christmas lights up all year long. And I don't know what goes through his mind, but I imagine by the time the 4th of July rolls around, he thinks to himself, I might as well just leave them up. Are you that guy? Don't be that guy. If you ornamented your tree this year, well, the tree's coming out. If you ornamented your house, the lights are coming down. If you ornamented your car, the antlers are coming off. But if you ornamented your life, well, that's always in season. So let's turn in our Bible to 2 places. Let's turn to Luke chapter 2. And then if you'll save that place, turn with me to Matthew chapter 1. In this series, the Ornament series, we've talked about how the Christmas story begins with a tree, a family tree, Jesus family tree, that luminaries like Abraham and Rahab and David hang like ornaments on this tree. And so each week what we've done is to take one or more ornaments off the tree, to learn their life lessons, to ornament our lives in those same ways. So if you're there in Matthew 1, look with me at verse 1. It says, the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. And then jump with me all the way to verse 16. It says, and Jacob begot Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus, who is called Christ. Now, between the birth of Jesus and then the public ministry of Jesus, well, we don't have a whole lot of information. Those are sometimes referred to as the hidden years. This week I went to Amazon.com and I just did a search for Jesus hidden years. And I got like 405 results. Some of the books said straight up that they were fiction, which I'm glad. Others of them claim to have, secret information about those years in Jesus' life. But there's a lot that we don't know about those years. What little we do know, well, most of that comes from Luke chapter 2. And so we're going to turn there now. Go ahead and turn with me to that place that you saved in Luke 2. Here we see 3 scenes. In 2, Jesus is an infant. And then in the 3rd, the one that we're going to focus on, Jesus was an adolescent. So as we talk about ornamenting our lives, first of all, we want to talk about doing that with new mentalities. Look with me at Luke 2, verses 41 and 42. It says, his parents, Jesus' parents, Joseph and Mary, his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of Passover. And when Jesus, was 12 years old, they went up to Jerusalem according to the custom of the feast. So there were 3 great annual festivals. There were other smaller ones, but the 3 great festivals were Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles. But of the 3, Passover was the greatest. And Jewish men who lived within a certain distance were actually required to attend. Now, there were Jewish men who lived outside that distance who still tried to attend if they could. When this story takes place, Jesus, it says in verse 42, is a 12-year-old. So he was an adolescent. The next year he would turn 13, and though they didn't necessarily observe bar mitzvah exactly as they do today, it still was recognized as the year that a Jewish boy actually, came of age. It was thought of as the age of responsibility. What I love about these verses is that we see Joseph as spiritual leader. We see that the spiritual development of his wife and of his son mattered to him. Notice that phrase in verse 41 where it says every year. This was something that Joseph did with his family every year. And I get the sense that it was not a game time decision. He didn't decide from one year to the next. This is just what they did. He wasn't the kind of guy who would decide on Saturday night whether or not he was going to church on Sunday morning. That would just have been what he did. As you look ahead to a new year, what do you need to decide now, not then, about reading, about praying, about attending, about giving? The cool thing is that while Joseph had to go because he lived within that distance where it was required, Mary didn't have to go, and neither did Jesus. Sometimes I like to talk about how we can have one of 2 relationships with God. We can have what I call a have-to relationship with God, where I do what I do because I have to, or we can have a want-to relationship with God. That's where we do what we do because we want to. There's a mentality sometimes that says, good enough is good enough, Like this is where we tell ourselves, if I have devotions once or twice a week, that's good enough. If I drop a few bucks in the offering now and then, that's good enough. If I'm in church every other week or even every 3rd week or once a month, that's good enough. But good enough for what? For who? What is my standard? Who am I trying to please? Here's what I'm not talking about. I'm not talking about getting on the treadmill of good works. I'm not talking about trying to do what God's done for us already. This time of year, at the end of a year and the beginning of a new year, gyms make so much money because people are eager to join the gym. They're eager to lose weight or to get fit. But surveys show that only 1 in 3 people who resolve to exercise are still following through 6 months later. I have a feeling the same thing is true in the spiritual life. when we're doing what we're doing because we think we have to, when we're on that treadmill. I don't think that that's sustainable. So if that's not what I'm talking about, what am I talking about? Well, let me put it this way. If the way you've been doing life hasn't been producing the kind of growth you might expect to see, do life differently. You know, if you're too beat to pray, too broke to give, too busy to serve, the old mentality isn't working. We need a new one. One that says good enough isn't good enough for me. You know, that I'm not going to gear my spiritual life to the lowest common denominator, but I'm going to ramp it up. So we can ornament our lives with new mentalities. Let's talk also about new opportunities. I'm going to read verses 43 and 44. It says, when they had finished the days, as they returned, the boy Jesus lingered behind in Jerusalem, and Joseph and his mother did not know it. But supposing him to have been in the company, they went a day's journey and sought him among their relatives and acquaintances. The first thing I want to draw your attention to is how it refers to the boy Jesus. Though Jesus was fully God, he was also fully human. As a boy, as a young man, he knew what it was like to be hungry, to be thirsty, to be tired. You're like, that's funny. That's what I am right now, hungry, thirsty, and tired. He also, because of his humanity, knew what it was like to feel angry or to feel sad. The Bible talks about him experiencing those and other emotions. Hebrews 4 verse 15 tells us that because of his human experience, he can sympathize with our weaknesses. I love that. But notice also in verse 43, it says the boy Jesus lingered behind. You know, I've had the privilege of traveling to Jerusalem many times, and it never gets old. You know, it never loses its thrill. It is such an amazing place to visit and to be. I can only imagine what it was like for Jesus during Passover. You think of the sights, you think of the sounds, you think of the symbols that surrounded him. It was heady stuff. But meanwhile, according to verse 44, his parents got a day's journey away. How did that happen? I mean, can you imagine that happening? Can you imagine getting through an entire day before realizing that your kid was missing? Well, to get some insight, we have to realize how they traveled in ancient times. Travel was not very safe. So they traveled in groups. You know, they basically carpooled. You know, they'd have a caravan. As Jesus' family made their way from Galilee in the north to Judea in the south, where Jerusalem was located, they would not have traveled alone. There likely would have been a large group, a group that got even larger as they made their way south. They would have been traveling perhaps with other family members, with friends, with neighbors, then with people in towns that they passed through. And so as these large groups, they would travel in numbers for safety, right? Safety or strength in numbers. Well, what would happen is what often happens when you have a mixed group. You know, if you live in a part of the country where you were able to attend any kind of a holiday gathering, you know that even if nearly everyone is there as a couple, that so many times before long, the women will be over here and the men will be over there. The men likely mindlessly watching a bowl game and not responding to anything unless they're being offered food. And the women may be having a really meaningful conversation. Well, that's the kind of thing that would happen on these journeys. Typically, the women and children were at the front of the group, and then the men would be at the back. So Joseph assumed that Jesus was with Mary, as most of the children were with their mothers at the front. And when Mary didn't see Jesus, she likely assumed that he was at the back with Joseph. That's how this sort of thing would have happened. But picking it up in verse 45, it says, so when they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem seeking him. Now, so it was that after 3 days they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the teachers, both listening to them and asking questions. And all who heard him were astonished at his understanding and answers. Now you see that reference to 3 days in verse 46. The first of those days was spent traveling from Jerusalem. The second of those 3 days was spent retracing their steps to get back to Jerusalem. And then the third of those days was spent searching Jerusalem for Jesus. And of course, they successfully found him. I don't know whether they issued an Amber Alert, but it's worth pointing out that this was not the last time that Mary would wait 3 days to know Jesus' fate. We can't help but think about those days between Good Friday, and Easter Sunday. But notice in verse 46 the reference to Jesus being found in the temple. The temple wasn't anything like our church buildings today. It had various courts, and we don't know for sure where this would have been. It might have been in the court of the Gentiles. It might also have been in what was called the court of the women. But notice the presence of the teachers in verse 46. This was an opportunity that Jesus would have had only once a year to travel to Jerusalem, to connect with, to interact with, to learn from these teachers. And he took full advantage of this opportunity. You know, if you want to grow spiritually, God will give you opportunities to do so. And now I'm not even just talking about those daily or weekly opportunities that we talked a little bit about in our first point, but I'm talking about opportunities that may be provided by a new calendar year. I'm talking about once a year type opportunities like conferences and retreats. But beyond that, I'm talking even about what we might think of as once in a lifetime opportunities, so-called divine appointments, those God moments. You know, the kind of things that you can't plan for, the kind of things that you have to have an eye for, the kind of things that you have to, quote, linger behind, end quote, to make the most of. You know, I don't know how many God moments you had in 2020. We might be quicker to describe 2020 as God-forsaken than God-filled. But you know, you never know why something happens the way it does. In life in general, or 2020 in particular, you know, why the delays, why the difficulties, why the disappointments. Howard Hendricks said, and I think this was really insightful, he said, "We are all faced with a series of great opportunities brilliantly disguised as unsolvable problems." Remember that the next time you find yourself backed into a corner. You know, we can live with a sense of expectation, knowing that even in the worst of times, God is at work. There's a saying, maybe you've heard it, 4 things come not back: the spoken word, the spent arrow, the past, and the neglected opportunity. So with that in mind, we want to take time to linger. Resist the temptation to rush into your day, to rush home after church, to rush conversations with family members and friends. We're going to ornament our lives with new mentalities, with new opportunities. And finally, let's talk about doing that with new priorities. So let's read from verses 48 to 50. Here's what it says. "So when they saw him, they were amazed. And his mother said to him, 'Son, why have you done this to us? Look, your father and I have sought you anxiously.' And he said to them, 'Why did you seek me? Did you not know that I must be about my father's business?' But they did not understand the statement which he spoke to them." Now, it says in verse 48, you know, that they were amazed. I mean, to everyone, it must have seemed like Jesus was some sort of child prodigy. Of course, he was God in the flesh. That's not true of our kids. They're not deity. They're not God in the flesh. But still, I think it's so cool when we have high expectations for our kids, when our aspirational thoughts for them just soar. When you think about this scene, though, this scenario, you know for sure that Mary had to be pretty upset. You know, this was not the kind of moment that, you know, she would have hugged Jesus right off the bat. She might have wanted to slug Jesus right off the bat. I say that in good humor, but you know how that works. You've told your kids a million times not to run out into the street. And then what happens? Their ball goes out into the street. They run right out after it. A car skids to a stop to avoid hitting them. You run out into the street, and how do you react? You probably don't say, "Oh, that was a close call." No, you're like, "What were you thinking? Haven't I told you a million times not to do that?" And then after you vent all that emotion, "Come here, oh, I love you." So it's like you have to get past that initial rush of, you know, just anxiety and concern. But in verse 49, we actually have not the first words that Jesus spoke, obviously, but the first recorded words of Jesus. And I think it would be a mistake to read any disrespect into them at all. It's as if Jesus is saying, "You know me. Where else would I be? What else would I be doing?" Can we say that? You know, it would be so cool if rather than people being surprised when we're pursuing our relationship with God, when we're, you know, making spiritual things a priority in our lives if instead they were like, oh, of course that's where he or she would be. Of course that's what he or she would be doing. It's all about priorities, isn't it? Someone said that a priority is something you put ahead of something else. Everyone has priorities. And I've learned that in life, to keep the main thing, I need to make it the first thing. That's one big reason why we might give God the first day of the week, attending, even if online, services like this one. You keep the main thing by making it the first thing. That's one reason why we might give God the first hour of the day. You know, why we want to begin our day connecting in some way with God. Or for those who don't actually wake up until hours after they get out of bed, instead of giving him the first hour of the day, maybe give him the best hour of the day, whatever that means for you. But I'm thinking now of the spiritual disciplines, the practice of solitude, the practice of prayer, the practice of reflection on the Bible. We keep the main thing by making it the first thing. It's one reason we might give God the first of all that we earn. You know, as we are blessed with income, first we give to God, and then we share with others, and then we enjoy the rest, including saving some for future enjoyment. There again, we keep the main thing by making it the first thing. C.S. Lewis wrote, "Put first things first, and we get second things thrown in. Put second things first, and we lose both first and second things." Maybe that's at least in part what Jesus had in mind when he said this in the most famous sermon ever preached. We call it the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 6, verse 33. "But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you." Is yours a first things first life, or is it a second things first life? Let's read the last couple verses in the chapter. Verse 51, it says, "Then he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was subject to them. But his mother kept all these things in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and men." I love how it says that Mary kept all of these things in her heart. As well she should. As well we should. What are you pondering? Have you ornamented your life this month as we've journeyed together through this Ornament series? How will you ornament your life in the year ahead? I love how it talks about the ways, the areas in which Jesus' life developed. In wisdom, it says. Think of that as intellectual development. In stature, think of that as physical development. In favor with God, think of that as spiritual development. In favor with men, think of that as social, even emotional development. You know, when you think about New Year's resolutions, I don't know if you make those or not, but for people who do make New Year's resolutions, they're always going to fall under one or more of these headings. And so we have the opportunity in 2021, not just in this holiday season, but as we go forward, to ornament our lives with new mentalities, with new opportunities, with new priorities. You know, before I close the message in prayer, I just want to kind of linger for a moment to use that word on part of the story. When you think about it, Joseph, Mary, they'd sort of lost God. They'd sort of left God, the Son, behind. They'd lost him. They weren't even sure where he was. I wonder, have you lost God? In a figurative sense, do you feel like there's a distance between you and him? Do you wonder where exactly it is that you left off with him? Do you wonder how you can find your way back? You know, the truth is God never leaves us. We're never actually any closer to him or farther from him in a spatial sense. But certainly there are times in our lives where, you know, because of where we're at, because of, you know, what's happening in our lives, we don't have that subjective experience of God's presence and of God's nearness. If you feel far from God, you know, that's what it's about. And the way back is simply to turn back toward him. And that's my prayer for you, for me, for us as we close out one year and head into another, that we would turn our hearts toward God, that we would be nearer to Him, that we would experience His presence like never before as we're ornamenting our lives in all the wonderful ways that we've talked about this month. Let's have a prayer together. Father, I'm just so grateful to you for all the life lessons that we've learned throughout the month of December. We've looked at some great women and some great men, and we've learned a lot of things from them and from their lives. And I just pray that we could take those things and continue to ornament our lives in those ways. I pray that in this new year, our lives could just become increasingly beautiful. And Lord, that not only would it be something that we could enjoy, the richness of that, but that others could too, that we would be a blessing to those around us. So we just commit all these things to you now. Amen.
What a great way to wrap up the holiday season and the year.
Yeah.
And now it's time to fill out a connection card.
So yeah, you'll see a link in the chat feed, but you can always go to our website, solachurch.life, and click contact. That's where the connection card lives. That's your way of letting us know that you joined us online today. It's also the opportunity for you to let us know if you want to take one of those steps that we talked about earlier in the service. If you want to step out and participate in one of our virtual small groups, there's a little box you can click on the connection card. If you want to step up and join the launch team, well, there's a little box that you can click for that too. So love for you guys to take just a moment before you're through here online and fill one of those cards out.
And I think we are all ready to move on from 2021.
Right? Oh my gosh, 2021 cannot get here fast enough.
I said 2021.
Oh.
Dang it. Oh my gosh.
Try again.
What a great way to wrap up the holiday season and the year.
Yeah.
And now it's time to fill out a connection card.
Yeah, so you'll see a link in the chat feed, and you can always go to our website, solachurch.life, and click contact. That's where the connection card lives. That's your way of letting us know that you joined us online today. But also, it's how you can let us know that you want to take one of those steps that we talked about earlier in the service. Like if you want to step out and participate in one of our virtual small groups, there's a little box you can click to let us know that, and then we'll follow up with you. Or if you want to step up and join the launch team, there's a box you can click for that too. So we're so excited about the people that God is adding to our church, even now online, but going forward in person. So take a minute, connect with us like that.
And I think we are all more than ready to say goodbye to 2020.
Oh my gosh, yes, right? 2021 cannot get here fast enough.
So we hope that you all have a safe New Year's Eve, and we will see you January 3rd.
Yeah, God bless you guys. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.